Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei and I'm so excited to paint with you today. Today we're going to do another page in our watercolor journals to go over supplies and materials. If you are new here, I am using a 6x9 watercolor sketchbook. This is Baohong brand. It is 100% cotton paper, which is very important to me, and it is 140 pound or 300 GSM cold pressed paper, so that's the weight and the texture. I'm using Core, Q-O-R, by Golden. This is what they look like, their brand. These are my favorite brand, but any brand that you have will work just fine. And I am also using Princeton brushes today. I have a Princeton Select size 10 round, a Princeton Aqua Elite size 3, and also a script liner, but I don't think I'm going to need this one today, so I'm just going to set that one aside. I'm going to be doing a flower painting in my journal, and this is based off a photograph, and I'll put the image up here. Trying to make sure I have room in here so I can put the image. This is a photograph. I was going through really old images that I had taken with my son of just some nature photography, and I came across this photograph, and I remember I love this photograph so much that I took probably I want to say maybe 15 years ago. It was a long time. I could look at the date stamp on it, but I'm guessing about 15 years ago. So we are going to recreate this photo in watercolor. So let's get started. So I think I'm actually going to do this more than once, and I'm going to do it in two different ways at least. So today I'm not going to do any drawing, but I think I will do this again where I draw out the image. So today I'm going to paint the flower first, and then I'm going to put in this beautiful bokeh background. Out of focus, soft, very, very soft focus background. When I draw it, if I draw it out, the next time I do it, I will probably do the flower first and then put in the background. So there's always many different ways you can tackle a painting like this. And I just want you to keep in mind or remember that there are a lot of different ways, not just the way I do it or any other particular artist does it, to achieve similar results or also very different results that have a stylistic difference. But you're still recreating the same kind of subject matter, but it may look very different, and style is important as well. The only thing I am going to draw on here, just to give me guidance, I'm basically going to do an outline of, and I'm doing it very, very lightly. So I'm just creating an oval of like the outside of the flower, like where I want the petals to get to. And then I'm also just going to put the center in just to kind of keep me on track perspective wise of where that center will be. So now I just have a frame for kind of where to put my petals in here. And I'll keep it very, very light. And we should be able to cover all that pencil up with our painting, especially our background. Okay. So for paint, so colors, we're going to use a Quinacridone Magenta. This is my mini palette. I don't have as much room to mix in here. You know what? I'm going to bring out another palette I have over here. I'm just going to clean it off. I'm just going to use this. These are actually Winsor & Newton paints, I think. Very old ones I haven't used in a while. But I have all this space on the palette that I can use for mixing color if I need it later on, because the Core Mini doesn't have a ton of space in the lid. It has quite a few little wells in here, but if I need more space, there we go. Now I have some extra real estate to mix my colors in. Okay, I'm going to start with my size 10. Now this flower has a couple of distinct features. It's darkest in the center, like right around the center of the flower, but then it's very light. It's got almost a white area here with the petals, and then the tips of the petals are darker. So that is that's a very short runway, I'll say, in terms of getting from the dark to the very white without it being a super harsh line, having it be soft. So this will be tricky. We're going to really pay attention. So I'm going to start by painting each petal individually. I'm going to start up here, and because I'm not drawing everything out, I'm just going to do my best. So I put my color down, a light version of this pink. I have rinsed off my brush, and now I'm just going to kind of put water at the bottom and let that filter in. I hope you can see that. Maybe I'll zoom in a little. All right, so that's that top petal there, and I feel like I can go even a little taller with this petal. I've gone over my line, but that's okay. I'm going to throw a little extra color right at the top. I'm going to do the center, that darker center area, last. Not very last, but after I've done all of these edges of petals. All right, so we have another one over here. Not quite touching until it gets pretty close. So again, I'm just rinsing off my brush, staying relatively light. Add in a little more pigment at the top. And I'm definitely going to go back and probably make these even a little darker. That's two. Then there's a third one out here that kind of leans. So I'm looking. Sometimes you can use a photograph just as an inspiration. Pink flower, green background, kind of know the type of petals, and then just stop looking at the photograph and just paint a pink flower on a green background. So the photograph kind of inspired you in terms of composition, subject matter, that kind of thing. But you don't have to try to copy it to a T. This one, I'm at least trying to get the petal placement accurate, or like the number of petals that are around. I can already tell mine are fatter at the top than what is in the image. Totally fine. And then this one is kind of coming out this way and leans in. So rinsed off my brush, bring it all the way to the center. Kind of building this all the way around. That's why I drew kind of the circle to anchor me so I don't have a weird oblong, like really off-center flower. This one is almost all pink. I think the mowers are outside. My dog might not be too happy with that. All right, and another one that like loops up this way. So we're getting into some foreshortening, where this petal down here, and that's why I made my circle, or my center, very far down at the bottom of the circle, because this part is kind of tipping out towards us, but we only see like a shortened version of this petal right here. And there's two like right down front, one this way, one this way. They're slightly hazy and out of focus. Just picked up more magenta. I gotta water it down quite a bit. And then we have this one kind of shoots out this way. There's a big gap between this petal and this one as it kind of changes directions. And this one is lengthened and a little longer. So for me right now, I am actually actively looking at the photograph. I'm going back and forth, trying to like place these petals relatively accurately. And I've got three really close ones that overlap a bit. And I think I'm a little bit off with my spacing, but I'm just going to make it work. One there. This one is the tallest, kind of as tall as that one. And then one tucked behind. Oops. Pull out a little color. I want that to be a little lighter in there. And then this one right here is like tucked behind these two. Make this a little darker on top. Make this a little darker on top. These have already kind of dried a little bit. I'm going to take a clean brush that's damp and I'm going to push up towards the color. So basically I'm wetting here, pushing up, and when it hits the color, it's going to invite some of that paint in, but I'm not physically pulling any paint down because I want this to stay relatively light or bright in color. I want this white kind of halo vibe to stick around. There we go. All right, these are, whoa, dry over here, but I am going to take another layer, I think, to the top edge of a few of these, probably to all of them, just to bring the color, the saturation down a little bit, or up, I guess would be the word. I want it to be more saturated. But again, trying to keep that soft fade into white. And then these are definitely a little darker. So I guess how I would define it, I was talking earlier about like inspired by, when you take a look at a picture, it's like, oh, that gives me a really good idea for composition and subject matter. And I'm going to create a painting with a pink flower offset to the right with a green background. And then there's also what I would consider an interpretation, where that's kind of what I'm doing now. I'm using a specific style or technique. I am trying to look at the image and recreate pretty closely the actual object. And when I do this again, I'll do the same thing, but I'll use a totally different technique where I might be even more accurate because I'll draw it or trace it out first. But yeah, so let's go into the center. All right, I'm going to use Payne's Gray. And I'm going to lay down a light layer of Payne's Gray. I'm actually going to use my smaller brush. Now this is going to require a lot of, so in here there are some kind of yellow dots. Actually, let's put those in first. I have some yellow. I'm going to mix it with magenta to get, it's more of an orangey. My yellow is very contaminated. Hold on. Boop, 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 boop. Just wet that whole first layer. Pull a bunch of it off. There we go. Now we have some cleaner yellow available to us. This is bismuth yellow in core, which I don't have in my other palette. But it's a cooler temperature yellow. And I just mixed it with magenta that was on my palette to get an orangey look. Okay, so there are a couple of like orangey little spots in there. So I'm going to put them in. I'm going to let those dry. I am also, so should I jump all those dry? because I'm going to put Payne's gray around it to start to build my center. Nice and dark center, darkest at the bottom. But I don't want these to completely run together. But I want to create some level of texture. These are all individual pieces. So I'm just going to work around these right now. Just popping in longer marks. And we're going to do a couple layers. We're going to have to go much darker than that, but that's the start of it. All right, these are dry. So we could just let things dry and jump to this ring. I'm going to pull out my dryer and I'm going to give it a quick once over so we can move on to the next step. We don't have to wait. All right, so that's dry. I'm going to come back in here with my magenta. We can see these petals have a short area at the bottom where it is very intense color. So I am going to start to paint that in. And even though it's very intense, it does still have a soft edge. So without contaminating the white part too much, I'm going to come in with water up above again and kind of invite, so clean water up here and invite the edge of that to kind of smooth out a little bit. But if you have too much paint down there, especially core paint, it'll travel very quickly. And I actually probably could have even done a smaller amount of paint because it really is starting to eat up. Switch to this brush really quickly and just pull out color. Get back down to where you belong. So here, I'm going to, on these three, I feel like I started with too much intensity of pink down below. So I had to come back in and really force it back down. Let's try it a little differently over here, where we're really putting just the bare minimum of paint. And now clean water. Make sure it's clean to preserve that white area to that edge. And now it's a lot more contained. You can always add a little bit more. And down here we get almost to nothing. So just softening the edges, but doing a lot more pushing towards the paint than away from. All right, so now let's take our Payne's gray. There are a few areas. This is a very light Payne's gray. You could even mix some magenta with it. But just a few shadowy areas. Where the petals overlap. I just want to make that distinction. A little shadow here, very soft, softening the edges. And then one more kind of right here. These didn't overlap as much as they do in the image. Maybe this one right here, we're going to make up an overlap. Okay, now we have most of the flower done, the pink part anyway. I'm going to take some more Payne's Gray. I'm going to come back in here and do some more texture and let some of the lighter areas shine through. I'm going to concentrate because I want the bottom of this to be a little darker than the top. There's a little bit of a highlight on the top. So I'm still kind of stippling in this vertical texture within there. I'm not going too crazy. And then I think I'm going to take, I have some orange in here. This is transparent Pyrrol orange. If you want to make another orange with your magenta, you definitely can. I'm just going to take some of this and kind of pop it in to the centers of these little yellow marks that I left there. And this center even has like a purpley hue to it, so I could definitely take some of my purple. I have a Dioxazine purple in here, which is, that one is brown, this one right here. Mix it with my black. So I have a really dark, very black color, but it's going to have a little bit of purple tint to it, especially as it dries. Okay, so we're going to leave that to dry and let's work on our background. So our edges are nice and dry. Background, this is where I'm going to mix over here. I'm going to take sap green for sure. We're also going to use some phthalo blue green shade to mix together with our sap green to get a cooler green color. And there's also a little bit of orange in the background. There's shadows and highlights and a little bit of leaves over here and a stem. We're not going to try to recreate this perfectly. This is definitely going to be where it's like an impression. So I'm going to try to get close and put shadows and highlights kind of in general in the places they occur in here. I am going to paint in. So how I'm going to do the background, I'm going to do wet on wet. I'm going to start painting around my flower with just water. The water is slightly tinted green. But if you don't have like a really strong bit of color on your brush and you're just doing water or super, super light wash, you're going to have a lot more control. Now, once this water barrier is down, you do need to make sure it kind of is wet enough. We're then just going to drop paint into it. So sometimes you want to do like half of the page or a quarter of the page because things will start to dry out, especially if you're working a little slowly around detailed edges. So let's do like from here over. And then you can always go back and add more. And we are just going to take some of this green over here. I think it's a little too blue. Let's go a little more. And I'm just going to start dropping it in. Drop it right along the edge. And then I'm just kind of messing it up, getting our first coat down. And the more paint and water I add, the longer it will stay wet. So now I can even go. Again, a super light wash works well also for wet on wet. So my paint water is a little tinted. That's fine. I was debating whether to carve out or work around a stem, but the stem is pretty dark. So I'm just going to paint it over top after the background is in. And it's the same color as the background, relatively speaking. So you can see the water barrier gets us right up to the edge of the flower without seeping into the pink or leaving a weird edge. You definitely can if you're not careful and you kind of go over it with water, go over the edge. Or if you don't get close enough, you definitely want to make sure your flower is completely dry, because if you touch the edge of your flower with water and it's still wet, you're going to get bleeding into your space. So you can see this is a nice light version, and we're going to get into, this is still staying wet because I added more paint and water to it. We're going to get all the way over to the edge, not being super methodical. This technique, wet on wet, in this way really does require, or is much easier for you if you have 100% cotton paper. It will be challenging otherwise. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of dab our way through. You can even use a bigger brush. So this, I'm gonna take some of my orange here, and I'm just gonna dab in a spot of orange here and up here, and there's another one like right here. So in the background, and then I'm going to keep going like around it right up to its edges with green. Great part about this type of technique too, you can even add more water to create. You can use a tissue to pull out color if you want some area that's lighter than what you put them down. And you can keep adding. So here I'm going to do some really dark color over here. You do still want to be careful, especially once you start bringing in darker color next to the flower. This is starting to get a little drier here. I'm just going to introduce some more water around the edges. So some significant shadows there. There's definitely some like under the flower here. And also with wet on wet, just remind yourself that the paint, as long as your page is still significantly damp, the paint is still moving. You might have to help it out a little bit, like move the edges a little bit, but as it dries, you're going to start to see the final shape of things. It doesn't always, when you put it down, you're like, that's not exactly where I want it. I want it to be wider or bigger. Sometimes you have to let it finish doing its thing. All right, this definitely has like darker, can add Payne's gray to this too if we don't want to make it too much more blue. Just darker green. Darker tones around it. So we can pull out some of this orange to make it lighter on one side, darker on the other. Use my smaller brush just to do some of these areas that are a little more fine-tuned between that go a little further down or deeper. Now I don't want to leave that just like that. I'm going to take water on my brush and blend it out so it doesn't look like a perfect outline. Even drop in some darker color up at the top. But keep playing until you're kind of content with the overall feel, and then you definitely have to let this dry. So these are still damp, which is good around here. I'm just going to refine these edges this way a little bit. It's going to be soft on the wet side, but where the petal is dry, so it'll be a nice refined harder line. And again, keeping this side soft. And then there is some space between here and this one. And we get all the way down in here in this one. All right, I think I'm going to add a few more dollops of some dark sap green on this side. Over here, get really dark. I'm going to add some splashes of water. And this paper, even though it's 100% cotton, is getting really buckled right now. And I am abusing it. But I know it can take it. And I know that when it dries, especially if I dry it with a heat dryer, it's going to get much flatter. So basically just scrubbing a whole bunch of all right. We are going to put the stem kind of right here, just making a suggestion of it. We're going to go in a lot darker. All right, we're going to let this dry. I'm going to dry it with my hand tool. And then we're going to put in our stem, some texture of some more defined leaves or grasses over here. And then we'll go back in and see if there's anything we want to do on our flower. All right, we're back. Everything is dry. I am going to take my actually I'm going to take a little bit lighter version of just sap green. It has a nice yellow tone to it, water it down a little bit. I'm going to put my stem in here, kind of right under this area. And I want it to have a little bit of a highlight on this side, so it's going to go a little darker on this side and underneath. A little Payne's gray. Get right under there and get nice and dark. There we go. All right, so that stem is in, and now I'm also going to take some of my green here right on top of my background and just kind of put in some of these grass textures that are a little more in the foreground. These I'm not really being particularly careful with in terms of how many there are, what direction they go in. There's grass there, I'm going to make grass-like things. And I'm going to go a little darker on some of them. I'm going to add something right here that's almost leaf-like. All right. And then last but not least, I am going to go back in. I'm really tempted to make these petals even a little more intense in color, but I know, like, I want to preserve this glowy feeling. And I know if I go too much darker, we're going to lose some of that. So I'm going to go to the edges. I'm going to go a little bit darker on some, but I'm going to try my best. And I'm going to add a little bit of texture. So maybe I'll go a little bit darker in here. Actually going to do a little purple, I think. And where the petals kind of split, create a little more I'm going a little darker on here, a little more texture. And then I think I have to go on here, very, very light line, but dark. Just to create some of this separation. I'm using a dark Dioxazine purple now instead of a gray. All right, I'm not going to do too much more. I'm going to take a little bit of my pink. I'm going to add a few light texture lines, and then I'm going to call it a day. These you can barely notice, but they will be noticeable as an overall piece, because they're basically the same color as what I've already got on there, and it's very light. These I'm going to go a little darker in the front, because they just are. And then I think we will be done. So if there's anything you don't like about your background, or if you want to do another layer, you definitely can. Do a little shadow under this one. And a little separation right here. There. I think we're done. Hands up. This I would like to do another layer on over here. And I'm just going to make this all wet, damp. I'm going to even reactivate some of the paint that's there. It just didn't have as much of a soft transition as I would like. It's a little too in focus. You can see that. It's just softening it up a little bit. And then I'm going to drop in a little bit more color. Just kind of using up what I got here. I'm going to go all the way across the top here. And I'm just noticing these white spots, which are bothering me now. I'm doing this very quickly. If I wasn't doing this on camera, I would be going a little bit more slowly. But we're already well over 30 minutes. So if you are happy with your background, definitely don't worry about this step. But we are going to dry this and then take our tape off. Don't forget to check the description for links to supplies and materials. A lot of folks often ask me where I've gotten things or what the name of it is or the link. There are links in the description. All right, I'm going to go ahead and dry this. We're going to take our tape off. All right, we're nice and dry. I did let it kind of half dry naturally and then finished it up with the heat tool. Let's take off our tape. If your tape is extra sticky, you can use your heat tool to kind of warm up the adhesive and it will peel right off. Looks like I got a little bit under my tape up at the top there. But there we are. How do you think we did? I think it looks great. I'm excited to try it again in a different way. But I hope you enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, share for later, or save for later, or share with a friend. Link in the description to supplies and materials. And I can't wait to see you for our next watercolor journal page very soon. Happy painting, y'all.